I always make sure to tell people, like, if you're having a hard time in life and you've been watching Netflix or your parents are drinking or smoking and eating junk food and you're watching mainstream media and you have a hard time, managing your own health or managing your own finances or managing your own life, just know you're working as designed. It's impossible to bring a nervous system to expose a nervous system like we have to this sort of environment where we mimic, emulate, copy, and mirror the most repetitive content of what we're bringing in through the eyes and ears. And there's your solution right there. If anybody wants to know, you just have to modify the repetitive content of what you bring in through your eyes and your ears, and your subconscious will do the rest if you stick with it long enough.
This is Spirit Gym. In today's episode, Paul talks with behavior modification expert and psychology researcher Jason Christoff. Thank you for listening to this podcast, which would not be possible without you, our listeners, and also our premier sponsors, Organifi, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, and Wild Pastures. The sponsors' special offers and discounts are mentioned in this episode, or you can visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast. In today's episode, Paul and Jason are discussing mind control and how you can take back your own mind.
Well, hello, everybody. Jason Christoff is here with us. He's not only a CHEK professional, but his expertise in mind control is well respected. Jason was asked to share his testimony on the issues of mind control in the U.S. Senate on the COVID roundtable headed by Senator Ron Johnson, plus speaking at the EU Parliament, the Romanian Parliament, and also at CPAC in DC. I'm excited to have Jason here with us today to explore the many ways people are losing their mind today and what we can do to protect our personal mindscape and use our mind effectively to create the life we want and become an active agent of positive change in the world at this important time in human evolution. Also, Jason is offering a new course that helps us all with the issues we cover in the podcast today and has a special offer for Spirit Gym listeners. So I'll let him share that with you up front so you don't miss the offer for any reason. And you can also look below in the show notes if you don't have time to scribble things down. So Jason, welcome. And please, before we begin our podcast, could you share what your special offerings are today for the listeners? Because I want to make sure that they don't miss this opportunity to work with your excellent material, education, and opportunities.
Thanks, Paul. And with all respect to your listeners, absolutely, I have a great free offering. It's a paid program, but it's free for your listeners.
Thank you.
I did a great presentation, I think about 4 weeks ago, when it was the 10 hidden secrets of media and government mind control using COVID as a backdrop. And it was probably my most comprehensive, my most accurate, my most interesting presentation on media and government mind control, brainwashing, and propaganda that I've ever done. And again, if any one of your listeners wants that paid program absolutely for free, they can email me personally at info@jchristoff.com. They can tell me that they're one of your listeners, and I'll shuttle it over to them free of charge. And that'll give them a good idea of what I do, what subjects I cover when I talk around the world. And it'll give them some good background in regards to how their mind is being hacked in ways that are usually, if not always, outside their conscious awareness. And even if they just watch that free presentation, it'll sort of buttress them or sort of inoculate them against future psychological operations. And that's something they'll be able to get from it at a bare minimum. Absolutely.
And you were going to get into a lot of that today too. So they'll get a little taste of all these things that we're going to be covering, which, is oriented toward that. That's what we're here to do. So that's fantastic. And I think all of you should really consider that. It's free and it's going to be great. If you search Jason's name on the internet, you can probably find his testimony before Congress. I watched it. It was great. And his last name is Christoff, just so you know when you send the email so you don't get the spelling wrong. But Jason, to begin with, can you share your background and what led you to focusing so much of your work on the issues of the mind? Because there's not too many people that ultimately end up going in that direction to the degree that you have.
Well, it's like everybody else, Paul. It's a long story. You're in the story as well, as is one of your master practitioners, Janice Marshall.
Oh, right on.
But I was a typical soulless, empty North American meatbag who had all the programming that I find in other people, and I help them alleviate. I had a lot of my programs. I didn't know anything about these programs, but I had a lot of them from the radio and the music videos and the movies and the TV shows. And I graduated from McGill University in 1994. I was not healthy whatsoever. Throughout my high school career, my university career, I was drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, really hurting myself. I was doing steroids. I was not focused whatsoever. I mean, this is how lost I was. And when I graduated from university, I started my first business within 6 months. And see, there's good programming and there's bad programming. And I had good programming from my family in regards to business. So that was something I kept along the way, and I got rid of all the other programming. When I got into business and I opened my first health and fitness club just 6 months after graduating from university, from McGill University in Canada, that's Canada's top university, I was very economically successful right off the bat. I had made about $26,000 for myself in the first 30 days of business. And that might sound like a bit of a blessing, but when you have these programs, when you're downloading your personality off the spinner rack of media, that just allows you to load bigger bullets into bigger guns and blow your own head off. So I just started buying more expensive champagne, taking limousines, buying big bags of cocaine, and just doing everything that the TV and these, mind viruses were telling me to do. I didn't even know what they were. I had downloaded them, obviously, the way everybody else downloads them. There was really nothing wrong with me. Everything was right with me. I was acting out all this illogical and irrational behavior because of how our safety and security systems work in the subconscious. And I was almost dead. I even took a flu shot when I was 26 years old, trying to, go up higher in the business hierarchy in my hometown, because all the business people were taking the flu shot and, doing the raising money for children's hospitals by eating ice cream. I didn't go that far, but I almost died when I took the flu shot.
Wow.
I brought my lawyer to my bed. I willed all my assets to my mother. I didn't think I was going to come out of it. And I just thought the same thing other people thought. I thought it would have been much worse without the shot.
Well, there's the programming.
Yeah, I had all the programming, of course. And then I had this ripping pain, Paul. I can't remember if it was my right leg or my left leg, but I had it a long time. But of course, it was getting worse, the more unhealthy. This felt like a lightning bolt. I could barely walk up the stairs of my gym. But of course, I looked great because I was on the steroids, and I limped up so no one could see me. But I was literally destroying myself on cue, which is sort of the primary memetic program that the ruling group puts into the media. So I heard about this healer that could help me. And she was from my town of Cornwall, Ontario, Canada. I heard she was a CHEK practitioner. I had no idea what that was, but I heard she was really good at putting people back together. So it was Janice Marshall.
Right on. She's lovely.
She's fantastic. So she comes down and she knew right away that this guy's killing himself. He's not doing the deep work. He's not listening to the pain teacher. He's slamming the door every time the pain teacher knocks, and he's sedating to his pain. She didn't tell me any of that. You could feel it. And she put on these kid gloves and completely handled me like a professional. And I had that shooting pain down my leg for, it must have been 20 years.
Wow.
And she took it away. It was a lot worse when she came. It was really accelerating. I don't know if it was the kidney or the liver or the leg length discrepancy, but it was on fire. She took it away in 2 weeks.
Great.
And I'm like, who is this magician? I'd like to learn what this lady is learning. So I was root chakra driven. I said, I want to go and learn what you learned so I can charge money and, make money for myself and help the world. So I went, she said, it's the CHEK Institute. So I came out, and I didn't come out to California at that point. I did Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1. I think it was either JP Sears or Eve SJ at the Granite Club in Toronto, Ontario. And they were all fantastic. And of course, your typical HLC1, they were talking about coffee and milk and weed, and everybody's hiding their coffee under their seats and hiding their bagels, and no one knows what to eat, and they're running into each other like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Like we didn't know what was going on at all. And it took time, right? It took time for it to sink in. And I started to listen to the pain teacher, and I came back and I was training clients, and the clients were like me, right? Which is how this universal casino works. They don't want to quit any of their addictions. They're paying me $1,000 or $2,000 to train them. No one's getting in shape. I'm embarrassed. They're embarrassed. Nothing's going on. The energy is stuck and stagnant. People are around town saying I'm their trainer. They're not getting in shape at all. I think I emailed the CHEK Institute and I got Vidya.
Oh, yeah. That's my assistant. She used to be my assistant for 11 years.
Yeah. And I said, I don't know what's going on here, but does any other trainer have clients that don't want to get in shape even though they pay? And they said, what? She said something about memetic mind viruses or mind control. And I'm like, mind control? I said, what is mind control? And she said, well, just look it up. You'll figure it out pretty quickly. These people have these infections of the mind where they're sort of afraid to be different or afraid to be better. They want to be with the group, and the group's not better. So it's very intimidating. So I started to investigate, and I really started to talk about it, give seminars on the mind control. And I started working online saying, I'm going to help you overcome any form of self-sabotage. And it was a learning experience. It was a practice. It was like a clinical practice. I was practicing this craft, and people seemed to really love it the way I presented it.
Great.
So I made up my own format, how I process clients through my system. I got so busy, I couldn't handle it. So I started an overcoming self-sabotage coaching school, coaching certification, and medical doctors came. And chiropractors came, coaches came, members of the general public came, and it just started really expanding from there where, we're on our 9th semester. And basically, if anybody, any of the listeners want to learn about that program, if they're ever interested in starting their own business, because we do focus a lot on business, because again, my business programming was always A1. I always was able to generate very good amounts of revenue. I don't kill myself anymore with it. So that's definitely folded into the program. And a lot of your principles, none of your paperwork, of course, but a lot of your healthy eating principles, healthy habits. We have our exercise library that is, it's actually licensed through PT Enhance. We've licensed it through them. Basically, we just try to get people healthy because health is a huge part of overcoming mind control. So you really taught me a lot, Paul. So I just want to thank you in public for that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's great.
If you have listened to even one episode of Paul's podcast before, then you will know that he is passionate, and some would say even fanatical, about the quality of the food he eats and where it is sourced from. That is why the CHEK household only eats pasture-raised meat, wild-caught fish, and organic produce. And that is why we subscribe to Wild Pastures meat delivery service. Each month, Wild Pastures delivers a box of meat that has been raised by family farmers in the USA using regenerative farming practices. 100% grass-fed and finished beef, pasture-raised chicken, and pasture-raised pork, as well as wild-caught seafood. You can customize the selection in your box, add on extra when you know you will be feeding more people, or change your options each and every month. You might be thinking that this will be too expensive for you, but Wild Pasture's mission is to offer the highest quality meat at the lowest prices because they want to transform the meat industry. And that means that more people need to be able to choose meat that is raised right. Their pasture-raised animals are part of a natural ecosystem. Their farmers use rotational grazing, practices that mimic nature, and so do not need to use synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, hormones, or antibiotics. This beautiful process doesn't require the external resources, such as massive amounts of GMO grain, required with environmentally depleting conventional methods. And best of all, the meat and fish taste amazing. And for Paul's listeners, Wild Pastures are offering you 20% off your subscription for life, $15 off your first order, and free shipping. Seriously, you can't find a better deal for top quality pasture-raised meat. Go to wildpastures.com/PaulCheck. You don't need a promo code. Just visit wildpastures.com/PaulCheck and start choosing the goodies you will have delivered to you in your first box.
What I used to find super frustrating as a younger therapist is, why do these people come and pay me a lot of money and I develop programs to help them with their diet, the right stretches, mobilizations to help get them out of pain, but they keep coming back and complaining it's not working, but I check in and they're not doing anything. It's like, okay, you didn't do your stretches, you didn't do your exercises, you didn't get the crap out of your diet, and you're complaining the program's not working, but you're not doing it. So early in my career, it dawned on me, it didn't matter how good of a therapist I was. That wasn't the issue. The real issue was behavior change. And really all the things that people come to me or people like you for is the results of choices, and all choices are the results of beliefs. So I had to look very, very carefully into what the background beliefs were behind the choices that were leading them into this sort of passive relationship with themselves and the inability to actually create the very change that they came and paid me to help them do. And so that led to many, many years of deep study of psychology, of brainwashing, of memetics, of, metaphysics. And I had to study world religion to see, because most of these ideas, when I tracked them back, were all based on something they'd learned in a church or a temple or, religious orientation. So I had to study all that. I was in the same situation as you. I was just there, probably 25 years ahead of you. But the problems have been the same for as long as people have been around, as far as I can tell. I'm glad that you did the work to really put programs together and even go all the way to the Senate and describe what was really going on. I mean, okay, he's speaking to the devil, telling them what they're doing. And so I'm like, I wonder how this is going to go over. It's like a fart in church or something,
It was really it was a great experience. And of course, I don't know if you remember, or I don't know if you could sense how nervous I was when he asked me. I can't believe he asked the question. He said, who exactly are they? And
yes,
who's attacking us? And I sidestepped it like an expert politician. We were talking about a podcaster that interviewed you earlier, and he had just interviewed Billy Carson, and Billy Carson does a lot of work on ancient history. And so when you do the work on ancient mind control and step out of the psychology of today, which you're really not allowed to do, you will always run across these ancient stories about who's controlling us from high atop the pyramid. So, I mean, I couldn't really come out to Senator Johnson and exactly describe who was attacking them, especially with the Egyptian obelisk just outside the door and everything along that line. So yeah, it was a great thrill to be at the round table, and everybody contributes. I try to absorb the attitude that you have. Everybody's here to contribute. Everybody has a special part of the puzzle. Everybody has their own talent. There's no one on that round table that spoke the same story, but I think it contributed to the idea that the average person in the public understands that something evil and dark is afoot. And I think that was the best we could hope for.
Well, not only that, it made it very obvious to everybody listening to you talk that this cat is out of the bag. I mean, people know something's going on and that the mind is very involved. So it was great. And I was grateful to see you express yourself and present yourself on such an important topic. Now, before we dive deep into the many issues of mind control, I'd like to establish up front that one of the reasons we're in the trouble we are worldwide with issues of mind control is that most people seriously lack critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Personally, I don't think it's very easy to gain control of an individual's mind if they already have a clearly stated dream for their life, a goal structure to guide the execution of their dream creation plans, and know how to think critically. What are your thoughts in this regard?
Well, I know you send your children to the Waldorf school, and it all comes back to, the basics of mind control. And I know you've done this deep research on the origins of the education system and all the ideologies at its base foundations. And yes, it is very hard to mind control someone who has this directional momentum. I believe if we're raised properly in a loving household with good nutrition, this is a natural outcome. This is standard equipment on the human body. But what the schools have turned into are indoctrination camps.
Absolutely.
Where even that study by George Land, where I don't know who employed him. I think it was NASA, actually, employed George Land to try and sort out the genius levels in the children, because NASA said they needed geniuses. I'm not too sure about that. But so George Land went and started with, I think it was 5-year-olds, and he formulated some kind of assessment model where 98% of the 5-year-olds qualified as geniuses. And then he'd come back every year. And it was a very long, drawn-out experiment. Took decades. But after the students graduated from grade 12, there was only 5% were geniuses.
Wow. Yeah, isn't that just the truth, though?
Absolutely. And so what's been happening, sure, something happened in 2020, which was sort of my point to, Senator Ron Johnson, but there was a lot of pre-priming.
Yeah, oh yeah.
There was a lot of, chemical dumbing down, psychological manipulation, predictive programming in the movies. You couldn't just launch what happened in 2020 at the public and have them react like the way they reacted. You're exactly right, is that if the people have goals and they're sort of on side neurologically and on side nutrition-wise, it's been shown that it's very hard to mind control them. There's a great lady, she's taken up mind control as sort of her primary topic of choice on Substack and on all the social media sites. Her name's Sarah Westall.
Westfall, yeah, I've listened to her podcast. She's great.
Yeah, she had this David Hodges guy on. He's a psychology professor. And this is what we teach in our institute as well, is that we teach that nutrition is a major repellent of mind control because of the way, chemicals interact with the brain. So I was very happy on this brand new 10-part mini-series that Sarah put out. It was paid, but David Hodges said he went over that, yes, when you chemically infuse the human, you weaken the human and you weaken they're going to have a lot less resistance to the mind control modalities. It's almost like if you poison an animal, you weaken them. And most of our behavior is based around the group pressure or the herd acceptance. So if you're weakened, whether it's physically or financially or psychically, you're going to need the herd more to prop you up. So this is what's really been going on, is your description of this focused human being is, this strong human, independent human that has their own goals outside the consensus trends. And they've taken that away from us. They really know, the group we're dealing with just don't know. They know how to make us quit smoking. It's the same hypnosis trick. They can make us do absolutely anything, but they know how to take away our self-confidence. They know how to take away our drive, our ambition, our self-esteem, and all those things weaken us. And you're wearing the blue blocking glasses, which I should be doing. But the fact is, there's a lot of things that weaken us. And we don't realize that this bioaccumulating effect of all these attacks leaves us we might look the same. Like physically, we might look like we do. But if we don't have the mental resilience, which is what Michael Nell's talked about in The Indoctrinated Brain, or what this guy David Hodges talked about, if we don't have the mental resilience, as soon as the mind controller leans on us and puts that group pressure shoulder into us, we sort of buckle.
Yeah. If you look at the work of Claire Graves in value structures, Claire Graves has a whole structure of values, how human beings evolve through basically their consciousness of what is valuable and what's important. And what he shows is that no matter how high you are on the values tree, that if you become disabled, such as sick or injured to the point that you cannot do what you normally do to feed your family or, make a living, etc., that you will fall all the way down to the bottom, which is kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's basic physiological survival. But the key point is he shows that you will actually become codependent on your family and other people in order to nurse you back up the values tree again, so you can go and, begin where you left off. The reason that's so important to understand is because when they keep poisoning people and weakening them and scaring the hell out of them and burning their adrenal glands out, and it's just one lion chasing you after another, that people actually don't realize that when their vitality is low enough that their autonomic systems, their glands and their organs and their internal physiological systems begin competing for energy. So this is when you see a lot of fungal infections, parasite infections, digestive disorders, autonomic dysregulation, things that are as common as white bread out there. But when a person is at that level, they actually have a real deep fear-driven, survival-driven codependence on other people. So once you get people to that state, if you can program the whole group, then actually everybody actually thinks they're doing the right thing. Like people thought they were doing the right thing by making the so-called safe and effective choice. But the reality of it is that for you to actually do critical thinking takes a hell of a lot of energy. The brain is a organ that only weighs about 1/20th of our body weight, but uses 80% of our available blood sugar when it's cognitively engaged. And that's the reason the autonomic or the unconscious mind is so effective at taking any repeated pattern and programming it so you don't have to think about it consciously anymore, because the conscious mind is an energy vacuum like crazy. So if you got a person who cannot even manage their basic physiological health, and you put them in a situation like COVID represented, they don't have the energy, and their body does not want to liberate the energy, because if it's a choice between keeping you breathing, keeping your heart beating, and trying to keep your immune system online and keep fecal material and urinary material or detox systems running so you can stay alive, and thinking, the body says, you're not really resourced enough to do that kind of work. It'd be like deciding in the middle of a serious illness that you want to get up and start building a new house. Well, that'd be a great way to kill yourself. You wouldn't have the resources. It would just make you worse. And while I'm thinking about it, have you ever read the book Nutrition and Your Mind by George Watson?
No.
I think you should check that out, because it's piles of research on exactly what happens to the mind of people that are malnourished, and various scientific research papers on what happens when you take people like prisoners and enhance their nutrition, or malnourished children and enhance their nutrition. But it shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that your mental function is heavily linked to your nutritional status.
Yeah, I do remember. I don't know if you know Dr. Russell Blaylock.
I remember some of his stuff. Yes.
Yeah, he had a book, a short presentation called Nutrition and Behavior, where he did review. It was only 45 minutes long, but very powerful. I think even might have been shared with us by JP or Eve. And yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's, there was a parole officer potentially, or maybe a scientist, Dr. Stitt.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, this, I imagine, it's got to have some crossover studies there. But yeah, I completely see that. And it's my opinion that when they did attack in 2020, and this is why your work made a lot of sense to me, because even when I was at the CHEK or studying the CHEK material, I would be asking myself, well, what's up with the mercury teeth fillings? And they know they're not good for people. What's up with the fluoride and what's going on with the pesticides? And then it just sort of hit me that they were priming the population for a long time. I believe this was the goal.
Absolutely. In my opinion, one of the most prominent signs indicating that we have a massive challenge with mind control and the results and the resultant loss of freedoms is that whenever people like you and I that are awake to these issues try to awaken others, the most common comment from others is that this is all a conspiracy. But I know from my studies of the world's great religions that they have a long history of being co-opted by those with ulterior motives. Examples of motives are financial gain, behavioral control, and keeping people passive in the name of God so that they can take whatever they want from them and implement their own agenda, which has been going on for thousands of years. One of the most amazing Bioptimizer's products I've ever used is Biome Breakthrough, which used to be called Leaky Gut Guardian. I can honestly say I use it every single day. I have a morning routine. I put a scoop in with 2 fresh squeezed limes. I put a little bit of other ingredients that I like in there. And I'll tell you what, if any of you have read my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, and you know how to read your poops, well, Biome Breakthrough makes for some really nice poopy policemen. I've got Wade here to tell us what's so unique about it, but I want to tell you right up front, I love the stuff. I don't go anywhere without it, and I keep a lot of it on hand so I don't run out. So Wade, what is it that's making that product so effective?
Well, first and foremost, we have to look at what's happening in the population at large. And Harvard just released an extensive study demonstrating that virtually everyone has some degree of leaky gut. And that means the gut permeability of our intestines is leaking toxins into the system, which are causing immunoresponses. Now, some people that's sneezing or allergies, but then it can move on to more inflammatory conditions. And anybody that's checked out your work understands this. The question is, how do you actually seal the gut so that you can stop this from happening? And we have a partnership with Birch International University in Croatia, where we have a team of PhD scientists working on this. And we've been able to combine a unique product called IGY Max, which is a patented egg-based product that enhances your gut health and reverses the damage that can be done by all these toxins that are leading to leaky gut. But when we combined it with some specific probiotics, they work synergistically together to be able to repair leaky gut in literally hours as opposed to going through an extensive protocol. Now, we can't stop ourselves from experiencing all the toxins in our world or food, air, water, you name it. It's coming from everywhere nowadays. So what we have to look at is well, how do we manage the damage, if you will, that we are taking, even if we're following, the highest levels of food hygiene and, conscientiousness. And so what's happened is Biome Breakthrough has been able to be proven in the lab and in folks. Research papers will be coming out very soon to demonstrate this. And that's why we've called it Biome Breakthrough. We're able to actually repair and stop the leaky gut from happening with the combination of IGY Max. It's a unique set of probiotics, and we're happy to deliver it to people. We're very excited. We can try it. It's a money back guarantee. If you don't feel better, if your poops aren't better, if you don't say, wow, my inflammatory conditions in my gut are going down, you get your money back. So it's really easy to get. You go to biomebreakthrough.com/living4D. You'll put in Paul 10. You get a 10% discount on this and any other products that we supply at Bioptimizers.
I can't recommend it enough. I love this stuff. And it actually tastes good too, which is unique. So thank you very much once again for making such an amazing product. I'm really excited to be able to offer it to everybody. Enjoy Biome Breakthrough. I think it's important for the whole family. Can you share an overview of the history of mind control and its use to control the masses? And in your observations and studies, I know you follow David Martin, so do I. Who do you think was using the technologies or running them or creating them during COVID and up to this very moment?
Well, I think I think it goes back far into history. And if you even look it up, it's not shadow banned on Google whatsoever. But if you look under media, the country, there's actually a country called media.
Huh.
And it's where Azerbaijan or Iran is today. And if you follow some of the work of people like Michael Tessarion, this is where we use the word media because it was this group who mastered these mind control modalities.
That's interesting. I never heard of that. That's a new one for me.
Yeah, and don't forget the ancient god Medea, where we also get the word media from. They say it's Medea, but it's Medea is how you pronounce her ancient Greek name. She was the god of illusion and sorcery.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because Lucifer is the god of illusion as well.
Yeah, I think this is where you'll always, you'll go back to some kind of dark frequency that doesn't seem to like life when you get down to the bottom level of this rabbit hole. But I've come across in my research, it's this group that basically understood that when you expose humans to repetitive content, I don't know if they're aware why, but I'm sure you could guess as to why. But if you expose humans to repetitive content, they start to mimic and emulate and repeat that content. And from my research, it shows that, there's this loving part of our nervous system that wants us to be safe. And it sort of knows genetically that there's safety in the bigger herd. And it's the repetitive content that's counted subconsciously by the subconscious mind pathway. So we don't know this is going on. And this counting of the most repetitive content is meant to reflect what the bigger herd is saying, thinking, or doing. And then not only is that, outside our conscious awareness, so is the forcing us to go along with it and adopt it as our own. And when I explain this in my presentations, I can't play long videos, but I've given private presentations for many medical doctors, and you basically just bring out some hypnosis videos that you can find on YouTube where the hypnosis expert, the hypnotist, is using repetitive content, and then bingo, bango, bongo, within minutes, the person is giving out the answers that the hypnotist drew and sealed in an envelope 4 hours before. And this is where it sort of started. So we have this ancient group in media who understood these very simple principles. And there's another controversial author called Chris Everard. And he really goes into the use of psychoactive drugs to, again, disrupt brain function in conjunction with these basic mind control modalities. So there was like the blue Nile lily and some psilocybin and some other things. So, and the beer was, the fermentation process of the beer by the ancient Egyptians. And there's a lot of connections back there. And it would be great if it stopped there, where you said, okay, that might just be some bending of the history or manipulation of the history. But there's a lot of Egyptian pathways when you get down and start researching the ancient origins of this. And then when you go to Washington, D.C. and see that there's a 555-foot obelisk, 0.5, and there's all kinds of Egyptian iconography in and around these power centers, you really start, there's nothing super concrete, but it appears this is just a mere extension of what this group already knew to control this many people. And they seem to have some very dark goals with the control. It's not like they're just trying to drive a Lamborghini and be done with it. It doesn't seem like they just want money. They want more than that. But it seems this is a big extension through secret societies where a lot of this knowledge about mind control and the poisoning of the human metabolism are passed down through secret channels. And this, to me, is what I see historically is this has been going on a very, very long time.
Yeah, one of the things, too, that makes it so easy to mass hypnotize or individually hypnotize people, there are people that are not hypnotizable. If I don't want to be hypnotized, I can resist it. I've had hypnotists work with me before. The point I'm driving at here is that the unconscious mind is not discriminatory. You can use the same strategies exactly to produce highly intelligent, highly capable people with good habits, or even laboratory animals, or you can make them do self-destructive. You can program to go to war with people. You can look at all the racial discrimination and sexual confusion going on. I mean, you can use, in other words, what I'm saying is the unconscious mind is really a recording and repeating device that intentionally, I think, by nature is there, like you said, and like we talked about earlier, from an energetic perspective to protect us. But the problem is it does not have a truth filter mechanism. So it doesn't know what is good programming and what isn't. And it's, I've done a lot of deep shamanic journeys and a lot of deep meditation and Tai Chi for a long, long time. So I've been a lot deeper in the psyche than most people will ever get, because to get past a certain point, you always risk complete schizophrenic breakdown or a psychological break. Fortunately, I have a strong enough ego that I can walk the edge of that. And I always hire sitters just because I'm going quite deep. But the thing that I found is that when we get down deep into our structure, there is essentially layers to the unconscious. In all my work through years of shamanic plant medicine work and in my own healing, I've been shocked to see how things will come up in deep meditations, doing work in the astral dimension, working with Jung's active imagination technique or plant medicines, and things will come up like childhood religious programming that I thought I was long past, and it's still lurking down there in the basement. And I think one of the things that's really important for people to understand is that the longer a program has been in you, in other words, the earlier it was developed, the more foundational it is and the more it influences all your other programming, because it sets up a perceptual field. So if you, for example, were raised a Christian and you think God loves you, but God will also burn you in hell, and that God is love, but God is also a jealous, angry God that says, thou shalt not worship any other God, what you do is you set up a field of chaos in somebody. So they don't really have a sense of trust. They don't have a sense of truth. You start them off in this sort of state of chaos. How does a God that loves you will also burn you in hell? How do you get Jesus, who's the Son of God, who came here to love everybody, but then you're sitting there singing onward Christian soldiers marching off to war with the cross of Jesus going on before? And as you know this from brainwashing science, you set up a field of dissonance, and then it's easy to direct somebody from there. I still can get shocked to find all of a sudden there's a program in me running way down there in the basement from when my mother was a Christian Scientist going to a Christian church. The Christian stuff was from, when she started taking me to Sunday school and church when I was an infant. And these are the foundation perceptual filters. So you start actually unconsciously screening everything that anyone tells you. For example, if you were programmed a Christian and somebody says, you really ought to read the Tao Te Ching. It's an amazing book. It's simple, it's profound, and it's far easier to understand than the Bible. You immediately have a resistance to it, even though you haven't got a clue who Lao Tzu is. You don't know anything about the Taoist approach. You got no reason to not look into it. But all of a sudden you find yourself having this unconscious reflex rejection of anything other than the programming. And so when we look at, for example, Carl Jung says all children are tasked with the unfinished business of their parents' lives. So when we look at issues like how was our mother and father getting along while we were in the womb, because that sets up an energetic environment that research shows affects how our DNA expresses itself, how the fetus forms, the biochemistry, the hormonal levels. Then you say, well, how was mom and dad and getting along, and what were the major world events? My mother was born right in 1945, just as the Second World War was coming. So she was in the womb during a period of war. When you start going through all the factors that actually really create deep programming, many of us are unaware that we're constantly repeating our parents' drug habits, bad money habits, fear habits, phobias. And because of exactly what we talked about in the beginning, and me and you both running into this situation where you give people good advice, but they don't use it, I had to start looking into all this. And I was just amazed at how most of my work had to begin with in utero, and also looking into the family tree and looking at what's being passed down generationally through generational trauma. And when I started working with that in concert with, rehabilitation or athletes, for example, that maybe did really well, got to the Olympics, but then can't seem to get back to their level of performance, and they're stuck and they don't know why. And so I have to work on these types of people. But it almost always, the pay dirt is down there in the first 7 years, mostly, of a person's life. And I think most people walk around completely clueless to the fact that this is actually still running them.
At my institute, we have a 150-point questionnaire that just asks the same thing 150 times in different ways so that we can see all the patterns that are still there. And yes, some of them are financial. I mean, there's only 5 major categories of self-saboteur. Like there's the victim saboteur, there's the financial saboteur, there's the child mind, pain aversion saboteur. So, and there's 2 other categories, but you're right. It's all about trying, and the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. So anytime you ask someone 150 questions, and the more they talk, the easier it is to pick out, of course, because you're going to see the patterns inside. And that's what we really focus on. This is exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, unfortunately, about that conflictual energy that, say, and we do have questions in the questionnaire about, did you go to Sunday school? Were you exposed to any conventional religion in the first 12 years of life? Not saying it's a bad thing, but those conflicts, basically it's just destructive interference. You'll have one brainwave come in to your consciousness that, yeah, God loves me. And the opposite brainwaves with opposite peaks and troughs come in that, God's going to punish you and, put you to the fire, put you to the pit. Well, that causes, this flat line, right? Destructive interference will cancel both brainwaves into a flat line. And that's also a form of weakness. So I do believe at one time with great leaders, there could have been a transfer of spiritual knowledge without this conflict.
Yeah.
And this competing ideas and confusion. One of the best authors on mind control is Just Merleau, and he has
I listened to his book.
Yeah, his book is fantastic, and he dedicates quite a bit to confusion as one of the necessary ingredients of effective mind control. And of course, we all know, or maybe we don't, but this is why you could go to a restaurant with a mask on, and then you could sit down in a restaurant and take your mask off. That was confusing, and they said the medicine was safe and effective, but they needed full legal liability for the safe and effective product that was going to kill and injure people. So there was so much confusion, so much of what you're talking about, and it's a weapon. It's really a psychological weapon to have a cessation of thought, cause a flat line in the prefrontal cortex, and outsource everything to the limbic system, where the jukebox of programs are ready to play at any time. That there's a fear response. So yeah, I completely understand your point. Is the more confused a person is, the more competing ideas you hold in your mind at the same time. I guess they call that the dissonance that we're. Cognitive dissonance. But the more of these competing ideas you hold in your mind at the same time, the easier you are to mind control.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. One of the most amazing things we can do for ourselves is actually to get high quality, raw, green, unprocessed vegetables into our body. And one of the things that I find amazing is Organifi's green juice. In fact, it's so amazing, I brought Drew Canoli, the creator of the product, to tell us what is unique about it. Drew, that is an amazing drink. How does it work? What does it do? Why is it so special?
Well, first of all, Paul, we went through 52 iterations to get the current formulation of green juice, and we're always increasing the value in it. One of the biggest things we did is we actually added 600 milligrams of ashwagandha, full spectrum, So it's a completely higher level of ashwagandha, which actually has been shown in clinicals, and we have dozens of clinicals on this, that has actually been shown to lower stress.
Yes.
Is the big thing.
Ashwagandha is something I've used for years, even with my clients for stress management.
Yep. So when you drink ashwagandha, it puts you in the green juice, it puts you in a meditative space. And we start at first thing in the morning drinking green juice. And because of the adaptogen in it, after 30 to 60 days of continual use, it makes such a big difference in your life. You're getting all the vegetables that are glyphosate residue free.
Yes.
They're organic, right? Highest quality that you could ever imagine. We got the spirulina and the chlorella, which is so important with all the different frequencies that are entering our environment today to help you detox from those.
Yes.
The green juice is bar none my favorite product at Organifi. And the best part about it is it tastes incredible.
Yes, it does. It's good. And I know my kids love it. So that's always the litmus test.
Yeah, it's like a matcha latte that you have first thing in the morning. And with the ashwagandha, lowering your stress, you feel it all day long. It gives you this internal wealth of energy.
It's just mixed with water. You mix it, and now is the green juice one you can mix with hot water, or is it best cold?
A lot of people actually prefer it with hot water. Some people will grab their favorite kind of oat milk or almond milk, something like that, and they'll add it to it. And we've gotten thousands of testimonials from all over the world. People start their day with green juice, and it makes such a big difference in their life.
Well, that's fantastic. So if you want to get your green juice, which I highly recommend, go to Organifi.com. That's Organifi, Organifi.com. And on checkout, Living 4D listeners get 20% off if you use the code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 20. You will not be disappointed. One of the other things, too, is and this is a problem in healthcare really seriously, but it's also a problem throughout the university system and many other systems. And that is that if you think of how 85% of people claim religious affiliation. So, that's 85 out of every 100 people has probably been raised in some kind of a church, temple, synagogue system of religious indoctrination. Now, these things purport to teach and can teach things like morals, virtues, ethics, and the things that are necessary for people to get along together in a society. But one of the problems is that when we're children, if we don't see mom and dad or Sunday school teacher or higher ups of any type in the hierarchy actually living congruent with what we're taught, the most common thing a parent will probably say to a child who wants to drink some wine or beer is, no, that's bad for you. It's not good for you. But then the child's sitting there watching mom and dad drink it for hours on end or smoke cigarettes or whatever. If the people that are teaching us are not in a state of resonance, then they're actually broadcasting chaos into us, and they're already creating illusions. That's bad for you. You shouldn't do it. But we're doing it, right? So they're living these illusions. And so paradoxically, we're learning to tell lies and create illusions right out of the box. And we're learning to be afraid. And we're often learning that the people that say they love us and the people that are considered to be gods are also scary and dangerous. Really, when you look at these things as the foundation of mind control, it's almost as though there's been a global net cast around the planet for a very, very long time. And if you study ancient scriptures, even Sumerian tablets, Hindu scriptures, all of them, you see constant reference to the gods being at war. And so it's like this sort of dichotomy, this always battling to control and have, seems to be riddled throughout our entire historical record and even our imagination.
Yeah, I find that as well. And you go back in the ancient text and you see that. And as for the confusing part about, seeing a parent drinking, seeing a parent smoking, and if someone had a parent like that and that person today is smoking or drinking, they're actually working as designed. They should know that there's nothing wrong with them. There's no fault in them. It's basically, if you're part of a drinking and smoking tribe, it's dangerous not to drink and smoke. I always make sure to tell people, like, if you're having a hard time in life and you've been watching Netflix, or your parents are drinking or smoking and eating junk food, and you're watching mainstream media, and you have a hard time, managing your own health, or managing your own finances, or managing your own life, just know you're working as designed. It's impossible to bring a nervous system to expose a nervous system like we have to this sort of environment where we mimic, emulate, copy, and mirror the most repetitive content of what we're bringing in through the eyes and ears. And there's your solution right there. If anybody wants to know, you just have to modify the repetitive content of what you bring in through your eyes and your ears, and your subconscious will do the rest if you stick with it long enough.
Well, yeah, there's that, but there's also the other factor, which is why Jung was so driven to teach people what individuation is, and that is that you have to actually reach the point of being willing to create value, to love yourself, to validate yourself, and to be capable of standing alone with your viewpoints, your own critical thinking outcomes, and not need approval from the pack or the tribe. And that means you have to go out of the child archetype into at least what I call the warrior stage, which is where you're a budding adult, but you're trying to figure out what's worth living for and what's worth dying for. And you've got to, puberty is so you actually evolve. You go off on your own and you look at the world through your own eyes. The problem is research by Ken Wilber and many others shows that 65 to 70% of the world population is still squarely in the child archetype. So they're heavily dependent on approval from others in their social group in order to feel validated, wanted, loved, needed. And therefore, it's kind of like if they're not bending to the herd mentality, they feel very, very scared and alone because they have not actually individuated yet into even the warrior archetype. So in my system, it's child, warrior, king, queen, wise man, wise woman as the 4 life process archetypes. But the most important step out of childhood is to become in the warrior archetype, which means I am getting clear on what I am, who I am, what's important to me, what my personal values are, who I will and will not vote for, who I will spend money with and not spend money with, knowing that there's ramification to the choice where the child doesn't really realize the ramifications. The child has no idea if you don't pay the landlord, you'll lose your home, right? They just want to know what's for dinner, what's for breakfast, and can I go ride my bike? And so when you keep enough people conditioned at what's for dinner, what's for breakfast, can I ride my bike, they're extremely easy to control. And if you have enough of those people together, you got yourself a herd, and so you just keep moving the herd around like a cowboy riding a horse moves, 1,000 head of cattle. That's what's really a big problem for a lot of people right now is they don't realize that they're in that herd of cattle. And the problem is they defend it too. I mean, that's part of the programming. If somebody, goes against whatever the narrative is, then you attack them because it's now they're programmed to believe that that individual's a threat. And this is, the story of this is as old as Jesus and before. It was Jesus's own people that crucified him, right? And there you see the story right in front of you.
Yeah. And I remember Dr. Mark McDonald, who's a psychiatrist in LA, who wrote a book. I forget what book he wrote, but he was getting interviewed by Mickey Willis on, I think it was maybe Plandemic 2. But he did talk about, that's child stage. In order to individuate, Dr. McDonald was saying you do need to experience pain and failure and discomfort. And again, you see how the system is interfering with that.
Yes, drugging it.
Yeah, they'll drug it, or even sort of psychically, they won't allow a student to finish last in a race now.
Right.
Right. And I think even there's some testing, maybe the SATs, you can't fail it. Even in a lot of public schools or even in high schools, you get pushed ahead into the grades above, even if you don't deserve to be there. In the universities, there's safe spaces where no one's allowed to be offended. So the people, the mind control experts that I'm alluding to in media sometimes, the old country of media, they knew exactly what you're talking about. So they knew the individuation was sort of a threat, that you can't mind control individuated people easy. But they knew that you could actually inhibit that proper rite of passage from child to adult, either by sedating them with caffeine or alcohol or marijuana, because those are all painkillers. And that's why in my program, we're always sort of pushing, the meeting with the pain teacher, which is something you taught me.
Yeah.
So because the answer to the pain is inside the pain. So if they're sedating all the time, they're numb all the time, they're tranquilized all the time, but this is also part of the mind control system, is that everything that numbs us is being normalized. It's on every street corner. And then if you're, say, a high school teacher and you come to the high school medical doctor, the doctor that's in charge of all the teachers for your region, and saying, I have some pain, they'll even frame it as a defect, that there's something wrong with you. Say you're depressed. Well, we can't have that, Judy. We can't have you depressed. There's something wrong with you. You have this pill deficiency, and you can see it's almost like the pain is a guardian. And not only are they numbing the society so that we don't make the proper transition from child to adult, they'll even frame it mentally on a repetitive basis that pain is a goblin. And that can be really dangerous.
Well, the other thing is, this gets into other agendas that we don't really have to go down because we got lots to talk about. But if you keep numbing the pain teacher, which is the messenger, right? First of all, if you numb the messenger, make the messenger silent, you never get the message. And these are survival messages. So that's a problem. And the second thing is that if you keep taking drugs that stop you from learning what the pain's trying to teach you, then you extend the time that the actual etiology or root cause of the disease manifests and festers in your body. So what starts off as an illness that could be addressed through, exercise, breathing, sunlight, nutritional support, like somebody that maybe is adrenal fatigued or has constant challenges with getting colds and flus easily, but they keep drugging it off. And then they think, okay, I can go to work now. And they're kind of running half-mast all the time. This goes on for years. And the next thing you know, they go up for a routine doctor's check and the doctor says, you got stage 3 cancer. You're going to die in 6 months if we can't pull a miracle. Then what they do is they get them in the hospital and spend tons of their money. I mean, the average person in the critical care ward spends their life savings in the last 5 days all on tests because they got them right where they want them, and they just sell the hell out of them on every test and every procedure they can throw at them and bankrupt the family. In fact, I recently did some research for a podcast I did, and the rates of bankruptcy, as I'm sure you're aware, are through the roof. They're at an all-time high. But when I researched what is the most common cause of bankruptcy, it turned out something like 70% of all bankruptcies come not by overspending on credit cards, not by gambling, not by drug addiction, to medical expenses that are so high it wipes the family's entire life savings out. So the point I'm making is, you see, when you think of what's behind the last 4.5 years and what's the real motive and what the globalists have been talking about, which is reducing population, you can see that this is all part of a long-range plan. And it's very well discussed if you start studying Bill Gates and Bill Gates' father and the whole history of genocide and a lot of these things, Rockefeller and Carnegie. There's a great book called The DNA, The Sacred Spiral by Leonard Horowitz. And he shows you right in there, they've been researching how to control people through their genes and using wireless technologies for over 100 years. And so the point I'm making is people actually have gotten to the point where they think it's just normal to take a drug for every itch, scratch, and bump. And if you study, DMS-5?
DMS-5.
Yeah. You can see they keep manufacturing diseases. They made drugs for video game addiction. And no, that came on. And they've got drugs for texting thumb. So they got special drugs for texting thumb. So they've turned this not only a massively profitable industry, but a massive dumbing down industry that actually pushes the actual disease deeper and deeper into the body till you don't realize you're being eaten from the inside out. And then you're in trouble. And then you're really profitable to these, Rockefellers and Carnegies and all these other large institutions that have turned us all into their little jackpot. They're like, they run the casino and we're the slot machines. We keep putting all our money into their pockets.
Over the nearly 30 years that Paul and I have grown the CHEK Institute, we've seen countless talented health and fitness practitioners fall short of their full potential, not because they lacked skill or passion, but because they didn't understand one critical thing. To succeed as a health or wellness professional, you must also have a solid understanding of business. Without this essential proficiency, personal trainers, coaches, chiropractors, and physical therapists get stuck in an endless cycle of feast or famine, never quite achieving the long-term sustainable success they dream of and they deserve. The CHEK Institute is about to change all that. This November, we are launching a brand new program, the first of its kind in our industry, called Integrated Health Business Professional Level 1. Whether you're a personal trainer, rehabilitation specialist, or looking to shift into health coaching, the IHBP Level 1 is a practical, step-by-step program to guide you as you build and scale your business. And it's all created by the CHEK Institute CEO, Gavin Jennings, who's built and run the most successful CHEK clinic in the world with over 120,000 client-hour sessions delivered. Register your interest now, and you'll not only get a fantastic discount on the launch price, you'll also receive some amazing free gifts with your purchase. And the best part? Just by registering, you'll get free access to an exclusive workshop with Gavin Jennings himself called Working the Middle Ground, The Future of Health. So if you are truly passionate about building a successful and profitable career in holistic and integrated health, then the IHBP Level 1 program is for you. Go to chek.group/business to find out more and register. That's chek.group/business.
Jason, besides what we traditionally classify as religion, we also have other large groups or categories that are vehicles of mind control. One is cults, and the other is any group identified or defined as an ism, such as Nazism, Marxism, socialism, scientific materialism, feminism, veganism, vegetarianism, etc. I'd like to know what your thoughts are in this regard. What should people be aware of if they are in or are being recruited into a religion, cult, or ism with regard to issues of mind control?
Well, I think the human nervous system just wants to be safe and secure. So if you have this preconditioned format or predictable format, humans will bite into it just to have some kind of something they can predict in their day. I think even the word culture, they say, is your cult. I mean, this is what the actual word seems to be phonetically designed to communicate to us, is that we're all in a cult of sorts. But the isms that you mentioned are very dangerous. And if people want to understand if they're in a cult, in a dangerous cult or inside a dangerous ism, all they have to do is look at their life and see if their life is progressing in the wrong direction. Any sort of, as you say, any belief system that you're living out is worth reflecting on and introspection. And this is very important, is that all humans are going to want to reach out and find some kind of script that they can act out during the day. Because if you get up and you don't know what you're going to do each and every single day, of course, it's very nerve-wracking. So generally, the social engineers that I allude to all the time, they know this, that the human mind, the human spirit needs predictability, some sort of script to act out during the day, something that's normal, something that's comfortable. And what they're doing is they're subbing in things that are super self-destructive, self-loathing, sadistic, and they're building this really dark utopia using these very simple, this loving nervous system that protects us in these fantastic ways. They're hijacking that. I mean, it is this loving subconscious mind pathway that leads us to, more safety and security by mimicking the repetitive content of our environment. They know that, and they're subbing in some extremely dangerous repetitive content that, of course, our subconscious mind is biting into as well. And the government's not educating us on how our mind really works. The media is not educating us. Even the private institutions aren't really touching on sort of on the fact of where our behavior really comes from in regards to how our environment leads our behavior. We really don't lead our own behavior in the majority of situations.
Yeah, actually, I ran across, well, we do have that documentary Social Dilemma, which is terribly revealing for everybody. Should watch Social Dilemma on Netflix, I believe, if you haven't seen it, because it unveils the dragon of social media. And interestingly, I'm sure you've seen that, haven't you?
Absolutely.
And isn't it just amazing that every single one of the founding developers of social media will not allow their children to use it? And they said, we created a dragon and we don't know how to get it back in the box. A couple of other thoughts that came to me while you were sharing there is, one, if you practice what I teach, one, the 1, 2, 3, 4 system, what is my dream and what are the goals that will support creating that? 2, create balance in your life between the feminine, rest, nurture, nutrition, hydration, and masculine, breathing, thinking, and movement, and doing things. 3, make effective choices. 4, doctors, have a clear dream, happy, practice happy making every day. 2, move your body enough to keep it at least at baseline health. 3, eat high quality food based on what your body wants, not what some diet expert says. And rest and introspection. You got to have enough rest to regenerate yourself, and you have to spend some time reviewing your day and seeing if your behaviors and your choices were dream affirmative or you just keep repeating the same habits. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because, you mentioned that most people just don't know what to do with themselves, so they want to be kind of told what to do all day, and that's what a belief system tells you to do. But when you have your own dream and your own goals, people like you and I do not need to be told what to do all day. I have no interest in that. In fact, I'm repulsed by it. That's why I hated the military. I cannot stand people telling me what I have to do, have to eat. It's really important to realize if you don't have a dream bigger than your crisis, you'll always be in a crisis state. And if you don't have a sense of your own unfolding and sort of your own inner esprit de corps, like what can I become? What can I do? What can I give to the world? What is my genius? Why am I here? Thus the ancient question, who am I? Which is really one of the most important questions to ask. And then, whenever you're looking at a religious system or any ism or cult, you're always actually being told what to believe. You're always being directed by people above you. You're always in service to some higher ideal that is outside of your own control. And therefore, you're becoming a child that is being manipulated by other people. I interviewed a lady named Jane Buxton, who is an amazing woman who wrote, I think her book's called The Great Grain-Based Con. And she did a lot of research into the growth and development of children in vegan and vegetarian families and found lots of hard research showing that there are tremendous growth and development disorders and brain disorders that are rehabilitatable. You cannot fix them when children are raised on vegetarian diets because they need fat and protein in order for their brain to grow and develop and their body to grow and develop normally. And she showed beyond a shadow of doubt, as has Autumn Smith and Fred Provenza and many others, that this whole thing is just an absolute nightmare. And from a scientific perspective, it does not work, has never worked. Weston A. Price showed, for example, that wherever he found a vegetarian tribe, no matter how healthy they were, within walking distance, there was a tribe eating meat of the same race in the same region that was much healthier. So what am I pointing out? We've got this massive globalist move toward this green movement, toward not farming animals, not eating meat foods, et cetera, that you know all about. But ultimately what that is a developmental nightmare that keeps people sick, keeps them broke, keeps them profitable. Yet people fall into this with such great fervor that they will attack you for telling them the truth. And the problem with a belief system is, by definition, once you have a belief, you stop asking questions. The day you stop asking questions is the day you stop growing. And if you stop growing, you stay stuck in the child archetype. You do not mature into a warrior or an adult. A warrior always has to ask questions. That's a constant question. What's next? What do I do? Who's the enemy? Who isn't the enemy? What's the safest and effective thing to do for my people? When do I engage forcefully? When do I not engage forcefully? How do I take care of myself to fulfill my responsibility as a warrior to protect my people? All that has been wiped out with the loss of our initiation processes. A good example is when the U.S. government started forcing Indians into reservations. The first thing they did was stop them from doing their rituals, such as dancing. They found that whenever they let the Native American Indians do their ritual dances, they became so strong they were uncontrollable, so they banned them from doing their own dances. And in fact, one of the guys I interviewed on my podcast, unfortunately, right close to when he died, it was really sad because I had a second podcast with him scheduled, but his wife called me a week before the podcast and said, I'm sorry, James has died. It was James Carse. He wrote a book called The Religious Case Against Belief. And what he showed in his very thorough and well-written book, and he was a professor of theology and philosophy at New York University for 38 years, so he really knew what he was talking about. He showed that you cannot actually practice religion if you have a belief, because as soon as you start believing, you stop asking questions, and you stop exploring your own development and your own relationship with God. So what happens is you fall in love with a book and a bunch of ideas written on paper, but you actually do not pursue an authentic relationship with God, and therefore you do not have a religion. A religion is supposed to produce religious experiences, but a religious experience is something completely personal. And if you have your own relationship with God, the first thing you find out is that a lot of the stuff they tell you in a church is simply not true. I brought that question up because I think it's very, very important for people to be consciously aware that if you're in any system which uses principles of indoctrination, and I think that there is actually things we can garner if all we do is study these things. For example, I learned a lot by being in a Christian church. I learned a lot about what not to do and what not to believe. That's valuable experience. I learned a lot in the military. One of the things I learned is I'm not someone who's easy to indoctrinate, but a lot of people are. And I learned how you don't want to be in any organization where you're not allowed to ask questions. I mean, if you cannot ask questions, then you're really at the mercy of other people and you never know what their motives are. And unfortunately, when you're in the military, you become the play toy of rich people that want to steal resources from other people, and they have no remorse. They put on a big show about, oh, we lost these soldiers. But at the top, it's just a game. And it's well known. That's why they call a battlefield a theater. And if you study the history of the military, you'll see, for example, during the First and Second World War, you had major banks funding both sides of the war. So, this is obviously a clear, shall we say, conflict of interest for anybody that has a concept of morality. You see, what you and I have done is we've asked a lot of questions and had the discipline to go find the answers. But it takes energy to do that. And it takes self-inspiration, motivation, and a desire to know the truth, and the bravery to be different than other people, knowing that when you share the truth, you can get attacked. But I'm like, I would rather die telling the truth than die being, a cog in a wheel.
Absolutely. And they're afraid of the Paul CHEK personality.
Well, they should be.
This is what, now, of course they should be, because, this is what testosterone as a hormone is designed to do, is to have very little fear and to live out the principles. The mind control behind the veganism or vegetarianism. They're doing it to weaken the human, to increase mind control efficiency, because it doesn't matter if you're financially weak, physically weak, or mentally weak. Like you could not have a good mental resiliency if you don't have the cholesterol and the saturated fat to repair the brain tissue, because I think it decays on 6-week cycles. So you can see that their game plan is always about mind control, but it looks like so many different things. Everything's about, like you said, depopulation. So it could be, I'm removing you with the new medicine, or I could be teaching a kid not to want to have children. But I'm going to get my way over so many different areas that you can see mind control and depopulation and poisoning the public. Like, these are the big 3 pushes that if people were healthy, it's just a lot easier to see. And that's why your work is so important.
Well, that's why your work's important too. And that's why I think this conversation's important. And we're at the break point for the podcast now. So and for those of you that want to join the Spirit Gym podcast membership, it's only costs you about the price of a cup and a half at Starbucks. You can get the rest of it, and we'll go deeper. And if you've listened to my podcast before, they're not just a bunch of yakety yak. They're educational, and we're obviously talking about, and I try to always talk about, important things. So when Jason and I come back to those of you that are members, we're going to get into several more relevant issues that we haven't touched on yet that are very, very important to understand for your own health, well-being, and your own spiritual development, personal development, and so that we can all do our part to wake people up by being living examples and create the change we need to see in the world from the bottom up. Because if you think it's going to come from the top down, well, I'm amazed you've listened this far if you still think that. So thank you to all of you for joining us for the first segment of the podcast. Thank you to my sponsors for your amazing products. Anything you guys buy from my sponsors puts good money back into farmers that are farming regeneratively, organically, biodynamically, helps heal the planet, gives you great nutrition and support for your body and your mind, a step in the right direction, and supports the podcast. So thank you for supporting the sponsors, yourself, and the podcast. And Jason, thanks for the first segment, and I'm excited to continue. So we will talk to all of you that are members as soon as you switch to the other podcast, the other half, and we will share lots more with you.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Gym with Paul CHEK and today's guest, Jason Christoff. If you found value in today's show, there's more great content waiting for you in our special Spirit Gym podcast membership. When you subscribe, you'll get access to exclusive, extended episodes of Spirit Gym with Paul CHEK, members-only Q&A opportunities with Paul, access to the podcast members forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can interact with other passionate listeners, and the opportunity to purchase exclusive Spirit Gym merchandise. Your support helps keep the show running and allows us to bring you even better content. So if you're ready to dive deeper and unlock all these amazing extras, head over to paulchek.com/podcast and become a Spirit Gym podcast member today. You can visit Jason's website at jchristoff.com, where you can browse his reprogramming and re-education courses. Jason is offering Paul's listeners complimentary access to his latest program, 10 Hidden Secrets of Media and Government Mind Control. Just email him at info@jchristoff.com. That's info@jchristoff.com. Make sure you mention that you heard him on Spirit Gym with Paul CHEK. You can listen to Jason's podcast, Psychology of Freedom, on his website. And if you're interested in his flagship program on overcoming self-sabotage, which he runs just once a year, please email him directly at info@jchristoff.com. For more of the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast, where you can also find details on the special offers from our premier sponsors, Organifi by Optimizers, Paleo Valley, and Wild Pastures, as well as links to Paul's social media, his YouTube channels, and his blog. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.